Different people learn new skills in different ways. Some people like to try doing the thing first. We call those people experiential learners. Some people want to read about how to do the thing first. We call those people visual learners. And some people want to try doing the thing while reading about how to do the thing at the same time. And we call those people nuts. Please welcome to the stage Richard Dickman with a story we call First Flight by the Book.
Hello, I'm Richard Dickman. One day my uncle, Larry, he's a pilot, has a couple planes, called me up, said, hey, this friend of mine won a plane from the Flying Lions, and he already has 2 or 3 planes. He doesn't need it. He said he'd sell it for $5,000. You want a plane? I said, yeah, I'll take a plane. So I called my brother, Dan, and said, hey, I'm buying this plane from my uncle, and if you help me keep it running, and maintenance it, we can both get our license in it. And he says, yeah, that sounds good. See, Larry had taken us both for a ride flying, fishing one time, and kind of got us interested in it when we were younger. It's the only time we'd ever actually been in a small plane. So we coaxed Larry into bringing it out to the high-pass runway. And we had a runway out there. It wasn't a good one, but we had a runway. And he didn't have any problem. He landed the plane on the runway. And we picked a place to tie it down. And the plan was Dan and I would meet up there on the weekends when I wasn't working, and we'd clean it up, get it ready, and then get lined up with an instructor. And then we'd start taking lessons. And Dan lived in a different place, so we'd just meet there, like on Saturday, and we start cleaning it up. And the first thing we found was a manual just like this one. And I dug it out, and he'd take it home one night, I'd take it home one night, and we read this manual. It's only 40 pages, so it's not like there's a lot. And the manual also has changing the oil, weight and balance, has all the other stuff, but it has a few pages of not learning, but how the plane worked. And if think about it, this was 35 years ago. There was no Google. This is all we had. And we didn't have any friends other than my uncle, and we couldn't be asking him how to learn to fly, So we start playing with the plane, and we got bored with cleaning it pretty quickly. And pretty soon, we decided to drive it around like a go-kart. This is a Piper Tri-Pacer. It's a 4-place, has 2 front seats, but it only has 1 door. The door would be on the passenger side like a car. And so I was smaller than Dan, and so I would jump across, get in the other seat, and then he'd get in that seat. And there was 2 steering wheels, 2 sets of foot controls, and between the steering wheels was the throttle and the brake, which was mostly what you needed. And the steering wheels were tied together. And that's a good idea most of the time, because if one of you got in trouble, then the other one could take over. But mine and Dan's history was when we got our license, our driver's license, Dad had a logging truck. And Dad had let us drive the logging truck to the store, to our friends, and there were a few times when we found ourselves in the ditch fighting over whose turn it was to drive out in the brush. And so if that ever happened while we were flying the plane, that could be a real problem. So we start taxiing back and forth, and at one point I pulled the steering wheel all the way back. When I did, I lost sight of the runway. And I thought, oh, that's not good. So the next week, I brought my pillow with me from home, threw it in the seat, jump in the seat. I'd sit a little taller this time, and we're doing it again, and I pulled the steering all the way back, and I didn't lose sight of the runway, so problem fixed. And so we're going back and forth, taking turns, like we should. And at one point, the plane came off the ground. It scared us, put the plane back down. Did you feel that? Yeah, I did. I felt that. It was kind of scary, but it was kind of exciting. And so we kept doing it, going back and forth, and pretty soon we get where we could hold it in the air about a second or two. The runway it's only 900 feet long. And one end of the runway towards Fairbanks, it had 30-foot trees right at the end of the runway. And going towards Chino Hot Springs, it was marsh and brush, and 400 feet out, there were 50-foot trees. And this thing was, when I first started there, this was just a road. And on the on the north side of the road, high voltage power came in, and every 400 feet there'd be a 3-foot box on post, a steel box. Power come in, power go out, 400 feet up, another box. And this box was only like 2 to 3 feet from the edge of the gravel. And then behind the box was all trees. So we widened this runway to the south 30 feet, but for some reason we never graveled the dirt, so it was just silt. And over the years, people driving in it when it was wet, it was just nasty ruts. So if you wanted to be as a pilot, if you wanted to fly on this runway, you had to keep your tires on the road, and that put your wingtip right next to these boxes. Right next to the boxes, and if you went past the box, you're in the trees. So we go through the manual. The wingspan on the plane's 30 feet long, so our wingtip is right there. So we're getting good. We're getting good at picking it up, dropping it, and we finally learned if you take the plane all the way to the end, turn around, if you hold the brake, you push it, give it full throttle, and then once the engine's up to speed, you let off the brake, you could get about 4 seconds in the air. It don't seem like much, but it was enough to get the hang of the steering wheel going forward and back and making the plane. You're only about 2 feet off the ground, so. But you didn't dare even try to turn. You'd hit everything. So we got good. We got confident. We got pretty confident, and I told Dan, I think we can fly this thing. and he said, I think we can. So we left. When we left that day, on our way out, so this is a university site, and we had a bunkhouse, and there was a caretaker staying in the bunkhouse from out of state. And when Dan pulled out first, Ken was standing on the steps of the bunkhouse. And he watched Dan pull out, so I pulled over to tell him, hey, it's just Dan and I, we're dinking with the plane, and there's nobody else on site, I'll have to get on my way out. He said, all right. And then I started to tell him, we've been taking off with the plane and flying it a little bit. I think we can fly that thing. And Ken says, yeah, you should be able to. I said, really, you think so? He said, yeah. And he said the smartest thing I ever heard anybody say, well, who do you think taught the first people to fly? And I thought about that. All week long, I thought about that. And I was thinking, well, the Wright brothers, they didn't have an instructor. They didn't even have a manual. And we had a manual. So I thought if the Wright brothers could do it, so could the Dickman brothers do it. So we get down there that next Saturday, and it's a nice day. We came in the gate, and this time I closed the gate, locked the gate, because we don't want anybody coming in here like an idiot and making us crash. We want this to be safe. So we got in the plane, and we zipped back and forth a couple times, lifted up, make sure we remembered everything from last week, and we were as good as we were a week ago. So I told Dan that the wind is coming a little from Fairbanks direction, so we have to take off over those 30-foot trees. And we know this because it says it in the manual. So we went down to the inn facing Chino Hot Springs, turned around, and we stopped, and we're thinking about it, probably trying to get our nerves up. And actually, this happened 35 years ago. And the statute of limitations should be up on this, but if you work for FAA and you don't think it is, this would be a good time for you to leave. So I asked Dan, are you ready? He said, yep. So I held the brake, give it full throttle, and the plane's shaking. I even leaned out the motor a little to get a couple hundred RPM, and then I let go of the brake. Man, we took off. Took off fast. We took off faster than the last time, but we only had about an hour's worth of fuel, so it was a little lighter than before, and by the time we got to that junction box, the one that was right in the middle, that was our where if we were on the ground at that point, you have to stop, or if you're in the air and you hit that spot, you can't stop. You don't have enough runway left to stop. And we were 10, 15 feet in the air by the time we got to that box. And so when we got there, we're angled and we're definitely going to go over those trees, but when we got to that height, something happened, and the plane started to settle. And something we hadn't felt. We'd only been 2 feet off the ground. We had no idea. And there was something that wasn't in the manual, and it's called ground effect. Ground effect is if the wings are within a half of its span from the ground, and the wings start to make lift, it causes pressure against the ground, and it causes a higher pressure, so the plane can actually take off faster than it can fly, as long as you're in ground effect. As soon as you get out of ground effect, you get to find out if you're flying fast enough. And we weren't flying fast enough. So we're heading for the tree now. We didn't go down, but we're heading straight at the tree. We have no choice but to try to get over those trees. And we're heading right at them, and right when we got just before the trees, I pulled back all the way, and the plane just hopped, and it just barely cleared those trees, got over the other side. Got over the other side and started climbing, and I just froze. I just locked up. It was that moment in time. People get that. You do something that is, traumatizing or whatever. People have this moment in time. This was my moment in time. We're 60 feet in the air. We're doing 60, 70 miles an hour, and we're climbing, and we'd never been more than 2 feet off the ground. And up we go. And I just kind of froze like in a trance and climbing, and pretty soon I saw the Shones' potato field over here getting smaller, and I saw the tax store and Valley Center over here getting smaller and smaller. And we just kept climbing, and I just held on. And I'm sure Dan was doing the same thing. I didn't even want to look. And I kept climbing, and then finally I realized, oh my God, we are way in the air. And I kind of snapped out of it, and I thought, we gotta stop climbing. We figured we were about 1,000 feet up, and so based on back at the runway, I pushed the wheel over forward because that's what makes it stop climbing or going down. I dropped the nose, and the speed went 90, 100, 110, 120, and the tack started getting close to red line, so I backed the tack off. And I noticed the climb indicator starting to get to zero, and we're starting to get a hold of it, starting to get more comfortable. But we're heading right to Fairbanks. We're heading right to Fairbanks International. And I told Dan, man, we don't want to cross Fairbanks International. That's going to be a real problem. So we got turned. So back at the runway, the steering wheel didn't do anything on the ground. All it did was, the only thing that turned it was the pedals. So I same as the runway, I gave it right pedal. The plane slid to the right, threw me against the wall. It threw Dan against me, and I'm like, what? So I let off, and I immediately pushed it to the left, and it threw Dan against the door, and it threw me against Dan. And I'm like, crap, now what? And I go, wait a minute. It's time to use the steering wheel. So without thinking, I just turned the steering wheel, and the plane is flying, and then it just started tipping. It didn't go anywhere. It just started tipping, and we took a dive. And I'm like, oh, I pulled it, get it back up flat, finally got it back up flat, and I go, now what do we do? So Dan grabs the manual. He starts reading in the manual, and in the manual, it has this thing called coordinated turn. And I'm thinking, what's a coordinated turn? I go, oh, I know. I got to do both those things at the same time. So I pushed the right pedal, and I turned the steering wheel, and when I did, sure enough, it started to turn, and then down we went. It went down, and I pulled it back up, got it back up straight, got it back into control. I'm like, now what? And we're thinking, I go, wait a minute. Back there, when you pull forward and back, that's what makes it stop from dropping or climbing. I'll bet I got to do all three of those things. So this time I pushed the pedal, turned the wheel, and when it started to drop, I pulled back a little. And when I did, right around the corner we went. Turn around, now we're heading back. Got it flying level, going back towards High Pass. And we started calming down, stopped shaking, started feeling it, getting the hang of how the thing works. It's really not the right time to be learning that. So we started getting comfortable and start looking around, and everything looked different. We have no idea where we are. And so we're coming back, we're right over the highway, and we start recognizing some roofs that been there for a long time. So we knew where houses were, but never seen them from the top. And so then we saw the stores. When you saw the stores, we knew High Pass has to be about 2 o'clock. So we start looking for High Pass, and we ain't finding it. It's not there. We're looking, and finally we spot it. Oh my God, it was about that big. It looked like 3 postage stamps in a line. Like, there's no way we're gonna land on that. So we didn't have a choice, so we kept going, went past High Pass just a little bit, starting getting the hang of the coordinated turn. When we turned back around, we were south of High Pass, and I realized, we got to get away from there in 2 directions. We got to get away from the runway so that we can get lined up with it, plus have enough room to descend. So we went back to the north. We went across the highway, and then we went 2 miles towards Chino Hot Springs. And then once we got up there, we turned back, and then I just placed ourselves where we were. I knew it was about this far from the highway to the runway. I just put us there. And we couldn't see it. It was too far away. So then I slowed the motor down so we could get about 100 miles an hour, and we start descending. And we're just watching. We're watching, looking for the runway, and finally we see it. It's a little. We're not quite lined up, but we're close. And we get closer, we realize, we're probably still 500 feet in the air. We're way too high. And I told Dan, all right, let's just go around again, and then we'll do the same thing. So we went back, turned, come back, got the same distance. This time I slowed it down to 90. And so we're coming in and, starting to, really getting the hang of learning how to fly here. And as we got closer and we finally spotted the runway, we were right in line, and we're also about the right height because we're going right at the end of the runway. And we're getting closer, and we're still up maybe a couple 100 feet probably when we go over those 50-foot trees. But we're doing 90 miles an hour, and when you're in the air, 90 miles an hour don't seem too fast, but when you get down close to a tree, 90 miles an hour is pretty fast. So we come past those trees, and it was like, holy crap, we're really moving. And then as we got closer to the trees and closer to the runway, it started getting intimidating. So I told Dan, we're lined up, we're in a good spot, let's just go around one more time, and then I think we got this. So I guess I reverted back to the logging truck. Well, the logging truck had a throttle as well. But the logging truck, when you pulled out on the throttle, the engine, you were giving it power. And the airplane is exactly opposite. I grabbed the throttle and I pulled it out. And when I did, the engine went right to an idle. And all of a sudden, we just started diving. Like, oh, crap. And I pushed the throttle back in, but we were already going down. And when I did, I pulled on the wheel, pushed the throttle in, and the engine started to catch it. And right when it caught it, the wheels hit the runway, and I pulled the brakes and stopped the motor. Like, oh my God, we landed it. So we quickly we didn't even stop. We just took the plane back where we got it from. I couldn't even get the engine shut off. Dan dove out of the plane. I thought he was going to kiss the ground. I killed the motor. I jumped out. I wanted to kiss the ground, but there was something behind me. And I reached out, what is that? And I yanked on it. It was my pillow. I guess my butt cheeks grabbed my pillow so tight it wouldn't let them go. So I threw the pillow back in the plane and shut the door. We turned it around, tied it down. I don't think we even talked. I don't remember even talking. We got in our cars and we left. A few days later, my Uncle Larry heard what we had done. Boy, was he mad. Rightfully so, because he probably would have felt a little guilty if something would have happened. So we got lessons. Chris Catalone here in Fairbanks taught us how to fly. And about halfway through that, Chris looks at me and says, I heard what you did. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you know what I'm talking about. You took that plane in the air. And at least he didn't holler at me. That was good. So I want to help anybody that wants to learn how to fly. I can tell you exactly how to do it. You get you a plane, you get you a manual for the plane, and you read that manual, and you want to remember everything, because the wrong time to be reading the manual is when you're in the air. And once you're ready, you go find you an instructor, because if you don't do something so stupid as I did back then, that's the stupidest thing I ever done. You need to go pay somebody a bunch of money and learn to fly the right way. Thank you.
Up next, please welcome Dark Winter Nights executive producer and volunteer wrangler, Robyne, with a story about the incredible versatility of our Dark Winter Nights volunteers we call Downtown Abbey.
Thanks all for coming. I have had the honor of coordinating all these wonderful people you see out here wearing the black shirts that make this whole thing happen. And been doing it since 2014, and it's just been great. And you know, volunteers make the world go round, right? I mean, yeah. KUAC couldn't do what it does without volunteers. I volunteer for Black History Month, for the foot race my husband puts on in the summertime, for our choir. In fact, in our choir, we have an even upscale volunteer in service to America, a Vista. And I bet there's a couple of Vistas in the audience, maybe. Okay. And these people give a year of their lives in national service, and they aren't paid. They do get a little stipend for rent and groceries, but they don't really get a salary. So they kind of live close to the edge. And this wonderful volunteer in our choir, her name's Abby, she didn't have a car, so she would ask folks in the choir if she could get a ride to or from rehearsals. In fact, I think my husband gave her a ride home from a rehearsal one time. And so we had a really great Dark Winter Nights show last November 19th. It was like one of our biggest ever. And volunteers came and made the whole thing happen. Were some of you at that show? Okay. And after that, my life kind of got chaotic for a couple of weeks. Thanksgiving was the next week, and then the weekend after that, our choir was going to give its formal winter concert. And so we have a great Dark Winter Nights show. The next week, at the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, at our choir rehearsal, our director reminds us all that we are going to do a little side gig at Pioneer Park for Holiday Craft Fair. And not much, 10 to 15 people. We don't have to have the whole choir show up. It's only going to take a half an hour. We're just going to provide incidental music while people are looking at goodies to buy. So she hands out 3 Christmas standards, sort of the fa-la-la kind of music. Let It Snow, Deck the Halls. And we do a quick run through, and then we go on to our regular repertoire, and then go home from rehearsal. Then we have Thanksgiving, and then the Saturday after Thanksgiving, my husband and I are at breakfast talking about when do we have to be over at Pioneer Park for, I guess it's that way, to, when do we have to be there to rehearse? And he says, did you by any chance text Abby to see if she needed a ride? And I'm like, no. And I'm thinking, okay, so I'll do that. So I do. I text, hello, Abby. Are you interested in doing the short Christmas singing at the Holiday Craft Fair today? If so, we could give you a ride. So 10 minutes goes by, and she texts back, "Hello, how long would this go for? And what would I be helping out with in the Christmas singing?" And I'm like, "You'd be singing." But then I remembered she wasn't at rehearsal, the previous rehearsal before Thanksgiving, so she didn't get that memo. She didn't get the Christmas music that our wonderful choir director, Gianna Drogeo, handed out to us. So I text back, "So, we're supposed to be there at 12:30. It would last about a half an hour. Gianna gave us a couple of pieces to try out." And I open my folio and I spread out the sheet music and I take a picture and I text her that picture. 10 minutes goes by, no response. So I say, "People my age were subjected to Christmas carols in elementary school, so we know these things. Let it snow, deck the halls, here we come a-caroling." And I'm thinking, maybe she doesn't know these things. But she texts back, "I can do that, but I would definitely need a ride." And I said, "Okay, how about we pick you up at 12:15? And she says, "Great." And then she texts me her address. So my husband and I get ready to go. We jump in the car. And he says, "You should navigate, I should drive." My husband and I have lived in this town for decades. We still argue about how to get around. And, he will be getting off the off-ramp, and I'll go, "Why are you turning this way?" So to prequel that argument, he says, you tell me how to get there, you navigate, I'll drive. So I'm giving them the directions to the address Abby gave me, and he says, "This doesn't feel familiar." And then we get to the house, and he said, "This is not where I dropped her off after rehearsal." And I'm thinking, she's young. Young people are moving all the time. They got to go where the rent's cheap. And then I text her, "We're here." And she comes out of the house, and my husband goes, "She changed her hair." And I'm like, "No, she's wearing a parka." So she gets into the car. She says, "Hi, Robyne." So, obviously we know each other, right? My husband's fears quelled. And then I hand her the music. And as we're driving over to Pioneer Park, and she's looking through it, and she goes, I'm really sure I can pick this up. I'm sure this can be, I can do this. So we get out of the car, go into the big civic center where the craft fair is, all these booths, all these things, interesting things people have made for Christmas gifts. And we're supposed to go to a rehearsal space on the 3rd floor. And we go in on the 1st floor, and there's choir director Gianna Drogeo, and she's sitting down in the lobby, and I say, "Hi, Gianna, what are you doing down here? I thought we were supposed to go up to the 3rd floor." And she says, "Oh, yeah, I just want to make sure everyone knows how to get there. And just walk over there and go up those stairs." So I walk over there to the stairs. My husband walks over there to the stairs. But Abby stops and leans down to Gianna and says, "Hi, Robyne brought me along today." And Gianna says, "Great. I'm Gianna Drogeo, the choir director." And Abby says, "I'm Abby." And Gianna says, "We have another Abby in the choir." I didn't get there that fast. I'm looking over at them, and I'm like, "What do you mean we've got another Abby in the choir?" "That's the Abby in the choir." And I'm looking at these two women introducing themselves to each other, and I'm thinking, okay, so the choir got started this semester a little clunkily. I had COVID. I wasn't even there for 3 weeks. We were all wearing masks. We were sitting 6 feet apart or farther. We didn't want to spit on each other. So we didn't get to know each other, but you don't need to introduce yourselves to each other. This woman's been in the alto section for weeks. So all this is happening in my very active brain, which is reaching for context to fill in the gaps. And then it suddenly hits me. That is not Choir Abby. That is Dark Winter Nights Volunteer Abby. And my brain filled in the gap with context because I had just worked very intensely with this woman the week before at that wonderful November show that you were all at. So she looked totally familiar coming out of the house. I'm like, yep, that's her. My husband's like, she changed her hair. He trusts me so much. So I'm now mortified. And in fact, paralyzed. I do not know what I have just done. I do not know how I can get out of it. I'm looking over. I keep looking that way because that's where my head went, where these two women were. I can't go forward. I can't go back. I can't figure out what to do. And I feel my husband's hand gently behind me going, we should go. We're going to be late. And so I trip up the stairs, and I'm thinking, what the heck am I going to do now? How am I going to get out of this? And I go up a couple of stairs, and I think, maybe I don't have to. How far can I ride this wave? And I look back behind me, and Abby's like all smiles. She's coming up the stairs. I'm like, what, girl? You didn't say no? And I'm thinking, what have I done? I'm bringing her into a building she's never been in before to meet a bunch of people she's never met before, singing songs she's never sung before. And she seems to be fine with it. I keep looking back. So I'm thinking, okay, I can get up the stairs. We can do this. I can make this happen. I can ride this. I can, maybe extend the lie a little bit. No, that would be bad. And then I'm thinking, oh, wait, upstairs, the 10 to 15 choir members who are already there, what if somebody's in the middle of it going, did anyone give Abby a call to see if she needed a ride? What would that look like? What if she raises her hand and says, oh, no, I'm here? And they'll go, that's new. And so I am trying to figure out what I'm going to do next. We get to the top of the stairs. My husband goes into the rehearsal room. Abby goes into the rehearsal room, and I pull out my phone, and I start looking through those texts, and I'm thinking, yeah, I really messed up. I texted Dark Winter Nights Volunteer Abby instead of Choir Abby. And I'm thinking, okay, is this going to work? And I peek into the rehearsal room, and there's Abby, and she's got a singer on her left and a singer on her right, and they've got the music open in front of them, and they're running through it, and she is sight reading the music. She's fine. And I'm thinking, I can get away with this just a little bit longer. But I'm not that kind of person. I have to come clean. So, but not now. We're about to sing. So we go out on the balcony. We're singing over the mezzanine of the Civic Center where all the people are shopping. We do our little fa-la-la numbers. Everybody's happy. The shoppers applaud. And then it's time to go. We go and get our coats on. And then I'm thinking, now's the time. Now I have to tell her what I've done to her, how I have abused her. And I walk over toward her, but my husband is also walking over toward her, and he says to her, so we should give you a ride home. And I'm thinking, yeah, do it in the car. The car's like the confessional. So we get our coats, and she says, you know what? I'm going to hang out here. I'm having a great time. I'm going to hang out here and get a ride home. And he's like, okay, good. Have a good time. And I'm like, oh. And I'm like just up to here with this adrenaline and mortification and embarrassment. So I finally, we get out of the building, and I grab my husband's arm, and I say, I have something to tell you. And I tell him the whole story, and he goes, I knew there was something wrong. Wrong address, wrong hair. And he's like, I just didn't want to say anything. And I'm like, thank you, dear. So at some point, I have to, come clean, right? The next Saturday is our formal concert. Real Abby, Choir Abby, they're both real Abbies, good grief. Choir Abby is going to be singing in that concert. So I'm like, okay, here's my opportunity to tell her what I've done. And I call her up and say, so, do you need a ride to the concert? And she said, yeah, actually, I do. So we go pick her up at a different address. She has different hair, not wearing a parka. And we come to the concert venue. We have a great concert. First time we've had a concert since 2019. We actually did great. We were so surprised. I was surprised. Maybe no one else was surprised. And we clean up a little bit, and then we say goodnight to everyone, and then we go home, and I tell her the story in the car on the way home. And she has a great laugh. And then she says, I'm so glad you didn't call me on that Saturday, because I had a ton of work to do. And if you had, or anyone else had called me from the choir to offer me a ride, I would have had to go. So I'm really glad you didn't. And I'm like, whew, dodge that bullet. So I thought, great. Now, since that time, Choir Abby has finished her Vista year. She has completed her service, and she's moved back to the lower 48. And I'm thinking, okay, what about Dark Winter Nights Abby? I don't have to tell her, do I? So I casually told this story to folks in the producer committee for Dark Winter Nights, just as an inside joke. And they said, oh, you have to tell that story on stage. And I'm like, oh, no, if I do that, I have to confess to Dark Winter Nights volunteer Abby? But I did. I gave her a call, and I said, there's something I need to tell you, and can I take you out for coffee? And so we made a little date. And then she texted me a couple hours before, and she said, I'm not able to make it. I'm not going to. And I'm like, I have to do this. So I texted her back, I really need to talk to you, and I need to be in person. And there's this long pause on the text, and she's like, what's this about? And I'm like, oh my God, she thinks I'm stalking her. So I call her and I say, it's about the last Dark Winter Nights show and the singing that you did the week after. And she's like, okay, we'll meet. So we do meet for coffee. I tell her everything. She's such a good sport. She was so enthusiastic. She had a great laugh. Everything is fine. And she said, I think I am going to volunteer for Dark Winter Nights again. But unfortunately, she was not able to meet tonight. No reflection on what happened. But just a warning for you all. When you sign up with me to be a volunteer, be careful what you sign up for. Thank you.
Our next storyteller learned firsthand how dangerous a ladder can be when one tried to bite her leg off. Please welcome Jenn Jenkins with a story we call DIY.
So this story begins in winter of 2010. So at that time, I am renting a wonderful place off of Sunway, which is a road off of Farmers Loop. And the place it's all the way at the end of the road. It's a beautiful lot, wooded lot, and there's a great house. It's such a wonderful place. It's a two-story house, metal roof. The roof is such a steep angle that you don't have to worry about snow building up, so it's really great. And I'm really enjoying living there. And it's January, and I come home from work and I dash upstairs and I use the bathroom and I get the dreaded slow flush, right? So you're like, oh, what's going on? And so at some point in time, I had picked up the knowledge that for a toilet and other drains to vent properly, you have to have air enter and leave the system. And at some point, I had learned that, in Fairbanks winters, you can get sort of this cap of frost, which slowly kind of chokes off that airflow. And so when that happens, no problem. Just go up, clean out the frost, and you're good to go. So I'm convinced that I know the problem, and I definitely have the solution. So, it's dark, and I dig out a headlamp, and off I go behind the back of the house, and I remember seeing an extension ladder sort of up against the house, and so I dig around in the snowdrift and excavate this ladder, and I get the ladder put up, and I don't like ladders, I really don't, and so I'm like, So I decide, okay, well, this house has a back porch with it's a screened-in back porch, and the screens you can they're on door, like they're slide, and so I was like, I can, I'll attach the ladder to the house, and so I grabbed my one and only ratchet strap. And I attached the ladder to the house, and I'm like, all right, I got this. And so I slowly kind of work my way up, and I get to the point where I'm sort of transitioning onto the roof, and it's like, well, this is different. So the way that it was, because of the angle of the roof, the ladder is flush with it, and you can't really put your feet in so much, to get a good surface area. You kind of have to turn your feet to the side, and I was like, okay, no problem. So I kind of crawl up there, and I get the frost plug removed, and I go down, down the ladder back into the house, flush, just like magic. Everything's fine. So I got this, no problem. And so I fast forward to February, and I'm getting ready for a cabin trip. I really enjoy cabin trips, and so I'm getting stuff ready throughout the week. I come home on a Friday. It's dark. It's a beautiful, beautiful February day, sort of those crisp, cold days, and I'm doing some stuff around the house, last minute packing, and I dash upstairs to use the bathroom, and again I flush, and the slow flush. Okay, well, no problem, because I left the ladder up, because that was the hard part, right? So I trot down the stairs, and I've been running in and out of the house all day, and I was like, this will be quick. So I grab my fuzzy gloves, and I decide that this Alaskan amber sweatshirt will be fine. So I grab my hiking boots, and I grab a headlamp, right, because I do want to see what I'm doing. And at the last minute, I grab my cell phone, which is really odd, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be still running errands, and I had a friend that was coming over. She would be joining me on the cabin trip, and I didn't want to miss a call from her if I was out, doing something in the garage. And so I, shoved the cell phone in my pocket and trot out behind the house and get to the ladder, and I have a moment where I pause and go, I'm looking at the ladder without the ratchet strap, because my one and only ratchet strap had been moved to the snow machine trailer to secure the snow machine, so I might actually make it to my destination with the snow machines. And so I'm like, I take a moment, and everything feels solid and feels good. It's like, okay, well, no problem. This will be quick. So I can do this. I've done it before. So I slowly work my way up the ladder, and I get right to that point where I'm starting to transition to the roof, and I feel myself falling, and it was incredibly clear. It was like, I am falling. and I drop about 12 inches, and I have this overwhelming relief, followed by discomfort and extreme confusion. So I'm like, well, okay, so I'm trying, what is going on with my leg? And so I look down in the light, the glorious light of the headlamp. What I see that the extension ladder, the two sections of this extension ladder have separated, and my lower leg is wedged firmly between two of the rungs. And so I'm like, well, and I remember, again, very clear thought, this is bad. And luckily, I didn't overthink. This is bad. That's all I needed to know. Okay, so this has to be resolved, and quick. And so the first thought that comes into my mind is I'm like, I could just push the ladder off the side, and then I decide that no, okay, that's. But best case scenario is broken leg, which isn't great, because I got a cabin trip planned, and I'm not even sure that I can. But I'm actually going through this thought process of like, well, maybe I can. Okay, so I then come to solution 2, which is like, well, I could call 911, and I was like, well, but and I knew this for a fact because previous experience had taught me that I will be embarrassed when the fire department arrives at my home. I will be embarrassed when people are coming out in their full turnout gear with axes and, so I'm not there yet. Like, this is bad, but we're not, in my mind, like pushing the ladder off and 911 are sort of equal, which I know sounds odd, but there's no clear winner. There's no clear winner. And so, I live alone, and the only other, I can't, as I said, I live alone, so my dog is there, but she can't help me. I mean, she's a border collie. She was an incredibly smart, wonderful dog, but she's not Lassie. Like, there's no home that she can go to and start barking, and like, no one is going to go, what? Is someone in a ladder? Not happening. And also, there's been sort of this recent evidence that female dogs in particular recognize incompetence. So I'm really glad that I didn't ask the dog for help, because she would have just been like, out of there. And fair to be true. So I can't scream for help. No one can hear me scream. And 911's still in the running, but still, no, I'm not there yet. And so I decide to start traumatizing friends. So I reach into, I was like, so I reach into my pocket, like, and I pull out my phone like it's a precious, like a kitten, and I was like, do not drop phone, do not drop. Apparently I'm only thinking in like three sentences, this is bad, do not drop phone. And so my friend, Mercedes, who's going to be going on this cabin trip, she's in town running some errands, and so I decide, well, I'll call her and see how far out she is. If she's like 10 or 20 minutes away, no problem. I guess apparently I'm just going to hang out here. So I dial, and if I left a message, it was unhelpful. It would have been like, hey, this is Jen. Can you call me back? But I don't remember actually. So next, okay. And so I remembered that I was searching through. Okay, who's in town that I know? And I remember my really good friend Philip was at a meeting, sort of off, near Creamer's Field, and I was like, I'll call Philip. And so I dial Philip, and he answers the phone. I said, hi Philip, I've got a favor to ask. Yeah. So I'm stuck in a ladder. Can you come help me? And which was stuck in a ladder was accurate, but not really descriptive unless you were there. Clearly, I misspoke. So he repeats it to me. He says, you're stuck in a ladder? To which I reply, I'm not kidding. And so then he goes, I'm on my way. And so it turns out that if you are on the receiving end of a call and someone says, I'm stuck in a ladder, your eyebrows will turn into question marks. And if there are others around, they'll ask you what is wrong. And if you tell them, that sets some other things in motion. And so, okay, Philip's on his way. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to, don't panic. And I have to be super careful, because every time my weight shifts, the trap that my leg is in gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And so I'm like, all right, just, hanging out. And I see lights come down the driveway, and, lights up the trees behind, comes in. And I hear a door close, and I hear my name, Jen. And it's a name I recognize, but it is not Philip, and it is not my friend Mercedes. So I have a third friend who felt my despair, or somehow, she arrives, and my friend Deb arrives, and she comes, sprinting back behind the house, and she's like, I was like, again, the confusion continues. I'm like, how did you know that I was in this? And so she clarified, yeah, Philip, told Kelly called me. I was like, okay, well, all right. So, and shortly after, Philip arrives, and so, and I noticed that they're all really bundled up, with like hats and gloves and actual boots and like puffy coats. And I was like, it's probably a lot colder out here than I thought it was. But we can't worry about that now. And so they're both here and I'm about 10 feet up, right? I'm just at the edge of where this, the roof transitions, and it's dark, and they have their headlamps, and they're trying to see what is going on with this, and it looks like I've just gone insane, and I'm just like refusing to get off the ladder, because if you had to look really closely, really close to notice that the rungs were just ever so slightly off. But I've got my headlamp. I'm blinding them. They're trying to survey the situation. All they're just getting is like white, that bright light. I'm not even giving them a chance to find a solution to this. And so I start making demands. Like I said, okay, we have to stabilize this. We have to stabilize the ladder. And Deb says, oh no, I think I can just, I think I can just push your foot out from the bottom. So she starts climbing the ladder, and I very explicitly say, you got to get off the ladder, because it's like your weight and my weight is combined. This is not working. We got to stabilize the ladder, which meant something to me. But if you just hear these things, you just go, I don't know what you want. So I demand 3 things. I said, we need a ratchet strap, a toe strap, and an axe. And now to be fair, no one asked questions. But I hadn't divulged my plan to anyone, but they're just like, all right, well, she wants these 3 things. Okay, so Deb makes a break to get the axe, because I've told her to, and then Philip takes off to the garage where the ratchet strap and the toe strap are. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, Philip is really fast. Boom, this dude, boom, he took off. And so we reconvene at the ladder. And I'm trying to say, okay, so we got to stabilize the ladder. And again, they really can't tell what's going on. And so I'm like, okay, just stabilize it. And so, of course, like the ratchet strap was at the full extent. And so, like, the ladder is, and so Philip is like, for what seemed like forever, was like click, 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 click. Come on, bud. I'm getting cold. And then I was like, all right, stabilized. And then I said, okay, Deb, hand me the axe. And as she's handing it to me, she says, Jen, there's got to be another way. So because I hadn't explained my plan, she's like, all right, it's field amputation. There's got to be whoa. No, I got it. And so I take the axe handle, and I wedge it between the two sections that got me pinned. And then I'm like, okay, Philip, throw me the toe strap. And he throws me the toe strap, and I kind of do this, I kind of loosely tie it around the axe, so it doesn't slide off. And then it's like, okay, pull. And he reefs on this thing, and with like all of his might, and it spreads the 2 halves of the ladder just enough that I can sort of get my foot out, but my shoe is catching it. So it's like, okay, so now that we have the ladder stabilized, it's okay for Deb to crawl up. And so she crawls up, and she takes off my shoe, and so I kind of stumble down the ladder and have like several kind of really bizarre steps, where I'm like, and I get in the house, and I'm like, whew, and they're like, are you okay? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. And so I look at my leg, which is all colors of the rainbow. And so they're concerned, but I'm not. That's just like a weekend for me. So I convince them, no, I'm fine. And so we've had this I think a very rare experience being stuck in a ladder. This is not, that's not something that people share too often. I'm certainly going to be okay if I don't get to relive that. So we just have like this awkward goodbye, because I don't know what the etiquette for this is. Like, there's not a card, like, thank you for saving me out of the ladder. And so we have this kind of, I convince them that I'm okay. They probably believe me. They are also probably just trying to relive this whole thing, going like, well, I saw this, but I don't know that it was real. And so we have this awkward goodbye, and about 10 minutes later, the friend that I'll be going on a cabin trip with comes, and I just open she's coming up the steps, and I just open the door, and I say, you will not believe what happened to me. And so I go through the whole, this is what happened, and tell them the story, and then, again we get to this awkward well, how do you wrap up that conversation? And so she goes, well, we're still going to go on the cabin trip, right? I was like, oh well, yeah, nothing's broken, we're good, no problem. Which is the right thing to ask, right? We're still going, aren't we? Yeah, of course. So in the light of day, that morning, I was like, well, revealed several things. One is that the ladder this extension ladder was more of a memory of an extension ladder, and so from all outward appearances, it looked like an extension ladder, and it had many, but not all the components of an extension ladder. What it was missing is one of the brackets that holds the 2 sides together. So I didn't think to look for that. My mistake number 1. And so, I was like, oh, okay. So then I decided, I was like, all right, this thing must be destroyed, because someone could really get hurt. And I don't know what really get hurt is, apparently, because I'm like, well, I guess I was sort of injured. I was mostly inconvenienced. So this defending ladder was later destroyed in a gathering known as the Ladder Smash. So, all right, I didn't want to take it to the transfer station hole because like it was really going to hurt. Like this thing is capable of deception and malice. It's got to go away, like away. And so so I I look back on that and what I try to remind myself now is just because I can do it, maybe I shouldn't. Right? There's a balance there, and more importantly, if I immediately conclude like, oh, this will be quick, no, it will not be quick. So, thank you.
Finally, I'd like to thank our storytellers, Richard Dickman, Robyne, who's already here on stage, Jenn Jenkins, Ryan, our audience storyteller, Jenny Brown, Jessica Thomas, and Glenner Anderson. Remember, these are the stories we will always tell up here in Alaska on dark winter nights. Good night and farewell.
If you enjoyed the program you just watched, please consider joining us at our upcoming live event, November 18th at Herring Auditorium at 7 p.m., hosted by me, Brittany Carnes.